Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel for another makeup murder mystery video. Today I'm going to be talking about the case of Elizabeth Bathory, also known as the Blood Countess. This is a really crazy case and it's from quite a while ago. This is probably the oldest video I've done so far. So finding out the information was pretty tough, like there's quite a lot of contradicting sources, but we'll get through it, it'll be okay. I realise I've only talked about male serial killers so far, so I thought, like, why not, it's only fitting. Let's talk about a woman, and we're going to be talking about the most prolific female serial killer in the world. She's actually named the most prolific serial killer by the Guinness World Book of Records. Imagine that, having a Guinness World Record in killing people. It's not really something to be proud of. Oh, hello ambulance. Before we get into the video, I'm going to give just a little disclaimer. I mean no disrespect when I'm talking about anyone in this video today, and it's only for educational purposes. The story involves death, it involves torture, it involves like gory subjects. It's just a very nasty story, so you've been warned. Just gonna tie my hair back. Ooh, this is interesting. I'm sorry, I'm literally just trying a new primer and it's like, yeah. So our story actually begins in Hungary, where Elizabeth Bathory was born. She was born on the 7th of August 1560, so this is a long time ago. So her father was Baron George VI of the Exed family. Her mother was called Baroness Anna Bathory, and they were both pretty important people with a pretty high status. So Elizabeth was born into wealth from the get-go. She was born a rich kid, and she was born into prominent Protestant nobility. Her family literally controlled Transylvania. That's how like influential and important they were. They literally controlled Transylvania. Also, her uncle, he was, you know, just the king of Poland, and she had an older brother. He was called Stephen. He went on to become the royal judge of Hungary. So we're talking about some pretty important and some pretty wealthy people here. So as a child and a young girl, Elizabeth spent most of her time at the Exed castle. As a child, she suffered from multiple seizures that were most likely caused by epilepsy. Obviously, at the time, they didn't know it was epilepsy because this is the 1500s. But looking back now, it was probably epilepsy that stemmed from the inbreeding of her parents. There's always a bit of incest in these historical stories, isn't there? So at this time, the treatment for epilepsy, the treatment for seizures, was rubbing blood of a non-sufferer into the lips of an epileptic, or giving them a mix of non-sufferer's blood and a piece of skull as their episode finished. So really gruesome, medieval, weird things. Obviously these methods didn't work. Apparently when Elizabeth was younger, she was actually sexually assaulted by her aunt into having a lesbian relationship with her. There are some sources that say Elizabeth was taught from a young age to be mean and to be cruel. So she was often beaten by her family's officers, and there were even rumours that she was being tutored by people who practiced in witchcraft and Satanism. However, these are just rumours. Not sure if they're real. Like a lot of things in this story, there are a lot of rumours. So she was raised a Calvinist Protestant, and she learned Latin, German, Hungarian and Greek. She was born into wealth, so she was obviously showered with education and knowledge and all of these fine things. And she had an already established social position. Her family were really important, and, you know, she was a pretty well-known person. So there was this rumour that when Elizabeth was 13, she had actually given birth to a child. Can you imagine that, 13 and having a baby? No thank you. The rumour was that she'd given birth to this baby boy, and apparently the father was a peasant boy in the town, which was at this time obviously very frowned upon. So the rumours go that after she gave birth, the child was given away to a woman that the Bathorys trusted, and, you know, just given away, taken somewhere else to live out its life. When Elizabeth was 10 years old, so going back a few years, she was engaged to this guy called Ferenc Nadasdy. Nasty. These are really tricky names for me to pronounce, I'm very sorry. You know, this was probably a political arrangement of some sort. She was from a very wealthy family. He was also from a wealthy family. She was more wealthy or something. She had like more power than his family. But you know, it was agreed that this would be a very good match. When they finally got married, as Elizabeth did have a higher social standing than her husband, they kept her name, which is pretty cool, you know, girl power. And when they were married, they ended up having 4 kids together, which is quite surprising because at this time there seemed to be a lot of people having like 12 kids, but you know, they had 4. So they got married on the 8th of May 1575. Elizabeth was 15 years old when she got married, and Ferenc, her husband, he was 19. There were 4,500 guests invited to the wedding, which, if you think about it, that's a heck load of people. But you know, I guess they were both pretty important people and pretty wealthy, so I'll let them off. And as a wedding present from her boy's parents, they gifted them a castle. As you do. And the castle was called Castle Cashtice, and this is where Elizabeth would live for the rest of her life. So like I said, they went on to have 4 kids together, and then in 1578 Ferenc actually became the chief commander of Hungarian troops. And then there was a war. Ferenc actually led the troops in a war against the Ottomans. While Ferenc was at war, it was Elizabeth's job to handle business affairs and the estates. She was responsible for the Hungarian people and Slovak people. She would also do some medical care. And then after one war, of course, there was another war. Her husband went to fight in the Long War, which was from 1593 to 1606. And again, Elizabeth was trusted and in charge of the estates and stuff again. While her husband was fighting in battle and stuff like that, he got the nickname as the Black Knight. However, during the Long War, Ferenc actually died. He died on the 4th of January 1604 of a very mysterious and sudden illness. And he literally died of this mysterious and sudden illness in the middle of a battle. I don't know if he was like fighting in this battle and then just like, oh, and died. Or if he was, you know, was really sick and he was like in the camp somewhere, but there was a battle going on. I don't really understand what it meant by in the middle of a battle, but he died. He did. There's a lot of sirens today. People today, they still don't actually know what Ferenc died of. There was some issues he'd had for years with like his legs, like there was quite a lot of pain in his legs, but they still don't know what actual illness he died from. So like so far, nothing crazy's happened, right? It's just like a super chill story. Well, it's about to go intense. So, between 1602 to 1604, these really nasty rumours about Elizabeth started to surface. They'd basically been some peasant ladies who had disappeared, and no one had cared about these ladies at all. Then, apparently, a noblewoman was slain and people started to care, and they started pinning it on Elizabeth. The Lutheran minister, Istvan Migiari, he made complaints about her publicly and also in court in Vienna. And these rumours went on for quite a while, but in 1610, King Matthias II, he decided to kind of investigate the rumours a little bit more. He entrusted a guy called Giorgio Thurso, who was actually Elizabeth's cousin, to dig a little bit deeper and investigate. You know what? He managed to do a pretty good job of investigating. He managed to get 300 testimonials from witnesses, and all of these witnesses basically had a lot of very nasty things to say about Elizabeth. So the witnesses said that Elizabeth's initial victims were people, young girls from the ages of 10 to 14, and they were servant girls, poor people who, you know, people didn't care if they were missing. Well, maybe not that people didn't care, but people didn't really listen or, you know, care to investigate. Elizabeth would lure young girls to her castle with promise of work as, you know, servant jobs or like as a maid. A bit later on there was abductions as well. Elizabeth would literally make people go out and abduct young girls. So, what Elizabeth would do to these young girls is pretty horrific. The victims would endure severe beatings, burning, mutilation of the hands. She would bite flesh off of the faces of people and their arms. She would also freeze them and she would starve them to death. There was also mention that Elizabeth would get needles and she would stick these needles into people's mouths and tongues. She really enjoyed burning girls with hot tongs and then instantly placing them in freezing cold water. And some people, she liked to cover them in honey and then ants as well. So many sirens today. So Giorgio Thurzo, who was, finding out all about this stuff, he found out that Elizabeth had tortured and killed more than 600 girls. And all with the assistance of her servants. However, she literally forced her servants to do this. Like, they absolutely had no choice. If the servants ever complained, Elizabeth would sew their lips shut. And they were tortured as well. She would do similar things to her servants as she did to these people she was killing. She would put needles in their flesh, she would burn them with hot rods, she would do absolutely horrible things to these people. And if they tried to escape or go against her, literally they would be tortured or killed if they were found out. She also made her servants take baths in stinging nettles, and she would make them rub the nettles all over their bodies. On the 30th of December 1609, she was arrested and her servants were arrested. The servants were put on trial in 1611 and they were actually sentenced to death and burned at the stake, which is horrendous. They didn't even have a choice in this. They were forced to do this. They were tortured by this woman and then they were burnt at the stake. So legend has it, as it were, that one day Elizabeth was taking a bath and a servant girl was brushing her hair. Apparently the servant accidentally pulled a little bit too hard, hurting Elizabeth, so Elizabeth slapped the servant with the back of her hand. Apparently the strike was so hard that it made the girl bleed and some of the blood went onto Elizabeth's wrist. Elizabeth noticed that the skin looked youthful and revitalized. So Elizabeth came up with this amazing plan that she would drain bodies of blood and she would bathe in this blood. So the crazy fact about Elizabeth is that she was never tried. Her servants were all convicted, they were all found guilty and they were all burnt at the stake, but Elizabeth didn't have that. She never really had that bad of a punishment, which is so stupid. She literally was placed under house arrest or castle arrest. She was made to stay in her castle for the rest of her life. And I mean, she couldn't go outside, but she lived in a castle. She lived in a castle. Anyway, she lived in her castle for an extra 5 years. She was there until 1614, and then she died. And she was 54 years old when she died, so she was fairly old for the 1500s. People usually lived until their 20s, so living to 54 back then, that was a pretty good effort. But it's pretty sad though, because she was literally a horrible human being who killed over 600 people. So the highest estimate of victims that she killed was 650 people. Apparently she used to have this notebook where she would write down every time she killed someone, like a tally chart kind of thing, and she would also kind of write down how she would kill them. So years later there have been conspiracy theories that Elizabeth didn't actually kill any of these people and she was framed for it. So people think that the suspicions were targeted against her for political reasons, as she was quite a powerful and wealthy woman. And especially after the death of her husband, I guess people, didn't really want a woman in charge. But that's just a conspiracy theory. It kind of makes sense if it wasn't true why they would, frame her. I don't know, there was over 300 witnesses. Could be either way, honestly. So that is everything. That went in my ear. Ugh. Anyway, I think that is everything. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Did you think that Elizabeth did all of these horrible things, or do you think she was framed? I think she did kill all of these people, because why not? Anyway, that is everything. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you find it interesting. I certainly found it super interesting to learn all about this case. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. See you later.